Now, as far as starting up Smoky Mountain Wrestling, I understand um, you were going to start your own promotion. Supposedly, you had an investor for $40,000 or something like that, but you ended up. Could you clarify the stories about? I guess you were part of the ownership at one point, or how did the whole thing come about?
Well, there was that's all hogwash. I had ran some shows and I had done some bought shows, did some fairs and some other things. So there was never an investor. I don't know where that came from. Well, I know where it came from, but it wasn't true. I was just running some shows, some independent shows on my own. When Sandy Scott called me and asked me if I'd be interested, and I said, "Well, I'll sit down and talk." And then we talked, and uh, you know, one thing led to another, and Smoky Mountain Wrestling was born.
Did you have any involvement of bringing Rick Rubin, the money backer, in?
I did not have any doing that. Now, um, looking back, I see a lot of signs that I wished I'd have saw earlier, but I didn't. Um, Jim Cornette said that he and Sandy were going to fly out to meet with Ruben, and I said, "Well, what about me?" And he said, "Well, I hated to ask him for another ticket." I said, "I got 600,000 Delta miles. I'll fly myself and go out." So I went out with him um, to this meeting, and that should have been my first inclination, but it never crossed my mind. I just thought he was trying to save money and get a backer.
Were you friends with Jim Cornette, I guess, before all that, through the NWA to lead to your partnership for SNW?
We'd never had any beefs or anything. I mean, we'd worked with Midnight Express a lot of times, but there was no issues. No.
What was the whole beef over?
Um, well, there's a lot of stuff, and I'm not going to get into it because a book is coming forward, uh, and I don't want to spill a lot of beans, but um, it was just it's one thing to I guess um, to have a business than running a business. You can know a lot about a business, but if it's not run properly, then you know it just there were some incidents where uh, he wrote some checks to some of my friends who were doing our printing, and I said, you got to pay these guys, and he said, well, just screw them, we'll go somewhere else, and that just to me wasn't good business. I live in this town, and these were my friends I wrestled in high school with, and they were doing us a favor, and so and that, from my understanding, continued even after I left. So
So was your main job promoting the town that you lived in? Because I heard you had the merchandising duties at one point too.
yeah, I was doing merchandising. I owned a screen printing company, and the merchandising did well. I mean, we were selling the videos and everything, and we just he wanted to do things different sometimes, and I didn't agree with it, and you know we had this ring truck that we went to the bank, and well, we were renting trucks, and it just got crazy because we were having to unload the truck, load it back up, 3 days, unload it, load it back up, store it. So we decided to buy a truck. Went to the bank, and of course, Smoky Mountain didn't have any credit because we were a new company. And he told Jim he could put it in his name, and he said no, and he said you put it in Sandy's name, and Sandy said he didn't want it in his name. So it ended up in my name because I was the only one at the bank could get credit. So that's where it was. So the ring truck was in my name, the insurance was in my name. So I had the whole liability of that truck and whoever was driving it. And then it blew an engine. We fixed the engine, and then I left, and then they were still using the truck, and it blew another engine, and they left the truck sitting at the garage. The garage called me and said that there's a $400 storage fee on it, and the engine was blown, and what they wanted to do. And I called Sandy and I said, "What are y'all gonna do?" And Sandy said, "Well, let me call Jim." So he called Jim, and then he said, do you want word for word?" And I said, "Whatever." And he, GD, FS, and hope it burns up. Just leave it setting. So Sandy told me, he said, "Sell it, go get it and sell it and get what he owes you." And because he had held me back on some checks. And so, because Sandy had already told me, and so did Brian Hildebrand, that he was going to try to get me to quit. So I knew what was coming down the pike, and I'd already left at that point. But anyway, so to keep my credit, because they were going to turn it over to collections, I went and paid $400 to get the truck out, had it hauled, paid $185 hauled to my place, and it sat there for 6 or 7 months, and then I finally decided to fix it, and I put a new engine in it, new struts, new brakes, new tires on the front, and ended up selling it to Goodwill, and still lost money. So that's the deal with the truck that everybody says that I stole, which I didn't. So
I think he said you stole a fax machine too, but he had bought it for you, I believe, right?
no, it's another Jim Cornette lie. He and Sandy bought fax machines, and I would go over at Jim's every day or every week and get the cards and take the cards to the printers to for the shows coming up the next month. So anyway, Jim's up all night. He doesn't wake up till 2 in the afternoon. Well, heck, most people's days done at 2 or 3, And so he says, "Why don't you get a fax machine? I can just fax you this over here, and you won't have to come by here." And I said, "Well, I can do that." So I bought a fax machine out of merchandise, and that's the fax machine. It was his idea to buy the fax machine, and I even told him he could come and get it, but he didn't want to do that. So that's the story on the fax machine.